This week on the Angus Report, we discuss how to maximize feed efficiency, hear more about mental health in agriculture, learn about the importance of perinatal nutrition, and we meet Bailey Harsh, an Angus success story. This is the Angus Report. Hello and welcome to the Angus Report. I'm Katie Holdener. Georgia animal scientist Dean Pringle has research goals that include understanding the biology of efficiency in beef production. His recent work explores whether there are conflicting goals among ranchers, feeders, and consumers.
If someone was to come to me and say, can't improve efficiency at the same time as I'm improving carcass quality, or if they were to come to me and say, my cattle are very high from a carcass quality standpoint, I'm afraid I'm going to lose some of that with selecting for efficiency. My comment or my answer to them based on our research would be that they don't have to give up carcass quality in order to improve efficiency.
Shopping and selecting for genetics led to unique lines of predominantly Angus cattle.
And so within each efficiency group, we also selected a portion of those bulls that we used that were in the top 5% of the breed for marbling. And then we shot for breed average for half of those bulls that were used in the high and the low feed efficiency group. So we had really 4 different lines of cattle that we started developing and are continuing to develop. One that's high efficiency with high marbling, one that is low efficiency with high marbling, one that's high efficiency with breed average marbling, and then one that's low efficiency with breed average marbling as well. And so to date, we've collected information on about 360 steers, Angus steers. Back up, the cow base that we worked out of was predominantly Angus, and we've used all Angus sires through AI. And I'll just give a real quick thanks to all the producers around the country that have donated semen to this project.
The researchers found that the cattle more efficient in feed conversion also ate less feed than average, but carcass quality was not affected.
What we found is that, in fact, when we select for residual average daily gain, we do see differences in residual feed intake, the measure of efficiency that we looked at, and it turned out to be those animals that were selected for efficiency had low residual feed intakes versus those that were lower efficiency had the higher residual feed intakes, which is what we had hoped to find. So that validated to us that if a producer uses that residual average daily gain EPD as part of their selection criteria, they should in fact over time produce more efficient animals. The interesting thing as we kind of dig into those groups, those efficiency groups, the interesting thing was that we did not seem to impact carcass quality at all within those groups negatively. So our high efficiency, high marbling group produced higher marbling than our high efficiency average marbling group. So it didn't seem that the selection or the pressure that we put on efficiency really impacted the marbling in those animals.
That's good news in improving efficiency in beef cattle. Maintaining progress in carcass and maternal traits is possible.
As we look at what the impact of efficiency is on our industry, we know that as we move forward feeding the growing population in the world, that we're going to have to become more efficient. We're going to have to produce more units of output on a limited number of inputs. And so, as we select for efficiency, now granted, this efficiency is based on intake of a concentrate. One of the questions that we hope also to address is, as we have selected these lines for efficiency based on, concentrate intake, more of a feedlot type of efficiency, what impact does that actually have on our cow? And so that's another area where we're collecting data. Of course, it takes a little longer to get the reproductive information and longevity kind of information over time. So but we're collecting that information as well to make sure that as we chase after this efficiency, and it is incredibly important for us to improve efficiency, but as we chase after that, we have to make sure that we don't negatively impact, female productivity as well.
Stay tuned to hear more about the impact of mental health in agriculture. We'll be right back with more Angus Report after a break.
Welcome back. A few weeks ago, we discussed mental health and its direct effects on farmers and ranchers. Michael Sturm, the EMS Safety Program Manager at Northeast Iowa Community College and the National Education Center for Agricultural Safety Emergency Service Program Manager, knows that the mental health crisis effects can be seen beyond the victim.
The mental health of first responders are paramount, and we're seeing that more and more prevalent in the news as you get to these whether it's police officers dealing with mass shootings or these just mass disasters that we're responding to, whether it's natural disasters or agricultural emergencies, and especially in the rural areas where a lot of your volunteer departments or a lot of your fire departments are volunteer departments. It's a good chance that you know the persons that you're responding to, or you know the families that you're responding to. So it weighs heavily on the responders that respond to these, and not only have to deal with the victim, but deal with the families and also deal with their own personal lives too, because being volunteer, they usually have other jobs, full-time jobs that they work. So if it's a call during the day or whether in the middle of the night, we still have to either go back to work or get up and go to work in the morning. So it doesn't leave a whole lot of time to kind of degress and absorb kind of what happened. It can become very cumbersome for the fire department. Talking about paramedics and just first responders in general, and relating back to the kind of mental health is a big issue that's coming up, and it's so much taken away from mental health and talking about brain health, because mental health gets that stigma of something's wrong with you if you have mental health issues. So we're talking about brain health. It's just keeping yourself in the right state of mind, keeping not letting everything bottle up inside you and kind of fester until it has that point, whereas deal with it while you have a low stress level before it gets to a high stress level. We talk about that stress levels in our initial EMT classes going forward. So hopefully that these new EMTs and paramedics that are going out into the field can be more aware of that. And luckily our agricultural injuries are minimal. A lot of what we see are vehicle-related injuries, so whether it's a UTV tractor, they got on the hillside, it rolled over. We see a lot of environmental issues, so they're out in 100-degree heat all day, got to get the crops in, but that gets to them, they didn't drink enough water, those types of emergencies, or if they're out in the cold, et cetera. Luckily, the extreme emergencies that you can think of, whether it's trapped in the grain bin or getting their arm caught in an auger or something like that, doesn't happen a whole lot. We'll go out, they might lose fingers, someone might amputate a finger, or they might get exposed to a pesticide or a chemical that they shouldn't have inhaled too much.
Sturm says to be aware of the way someone might respond to a situation or emergency.
Yeah, well, there's always that stigmatism, right, that you're emergency services, so you're tough. And to a certain point, we have to kind of project that as well, project that confidence. But the way to start talking about that is really individually with the departments. So we have, after major incidents, what's called critical incident stress debriefings, where we get together as a group, we talk about not only the call, but the emotional side of the call, or how we're feeling, those type of things, and some tips that how to deal with it. So it might be just something as simple as get together and talk with somebody, maybe exercise a little bit more, but also knowing what the warning stresses are of possible stressors that could escalate and become either physical or emotional problems for those responders.
Sturm is dedicated to ensuring everyone remains safe, no matter what industry they're involved in.
Different programs that we use with agricultural safety, especially on like the EMS side. So we do have we have, for example, the university here in Iowa comes down. They bring a lot of their medical students. So whether that's someone that's going to be a doctor, being a nurse, being a dentist, veterinary, some people that might never have exposure to egg to come in. I mean, you can live in rural Iowa, but if you live in town, still not get that full exposure to life on the farm or the hazards that are out on the farm. So it's really a collaboration between not only our group, but the emergency responders and the different farmers out there. Especially when you talk about mental health. Mental health is not only an issue on first responders, but it's an issue in the farming communities too, with the farmers, with the economy as it goes up and down, and how the crops do from year to year.
For more information on farm safety programs and resources, visit necasag.org. We check in now on the latest cattle market news with the Cattle Facts Update.
Hello, and welcome to the Cattle Facts Update. I'm Tanner Ahearn. The September 1 Cattle on Feed report was recently released, and the results went against a trend that has been in place for over 2.5 years. The report showed that inventory in feedlots with a one-time capacity of over 1,000 head was 1.3% or 143,000 head below September 1st, 2018. This was the first year-over-year decline in on-feed supplies since December 2016. Furthermore, September 2014, which was near the beginning of the cow herd expansion phase, was the last time cattle on feed was at least 140,000 head less than year-ago levels. Tighter supplies in the north, consisting of Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota, are the primary driver for the smaller overall supplies and more than offsets the slight increases in Kansas and the Panhandle region. In addition, August marked the 4th consecutive month the cattle placed on feed was below 2018 levels. Placements in August were down 9% or 186,000 head versus last year, as producers likely fought the lower prices and delayed marketing feeder cattle and calves, especially in the northern plains where grazing conditions remain adequate. Year to date, placements are down 1%. Even with one less day than last year and disruptions to the packing capacity early in the month, marketings in August were down only 2% compared to a year ago. Through the first 8 months of the year, marketings are up 1.1%, which has aided in keeping the cattle feeding segment current over the last several months. This is supported by carcass weights running below a year ago and the estimated number of cattle on feed over 150 days as a percent of the total on feed population was only 0.2 percentage points above the 5-year average on September 1. Going forward, the cattle on feed population will seasonally grow larger into the fall, and placements should pick up the pace as the fall calf run approaches. However, if the aggressive slaughter rate that occurred through the summer continues, expect cattle on feed supplies to remain near or below year-ago levels, at least in the short term. For the Angus Report and Cattle Facts, I'm Tanner Ahearn.
To learn more about Cattle Facts, your leading source for beef industry market information, visit cattlefacts.com. Next on the Angus Report, we talk about perinatal nutrition. Stay with us.
Welcome back. 5.5% of calf deaths happen before weaning, at a cost of at least $670 per head to American cattle producers. But Allison Meyer says her University of Missouri research in perinatal nutrition may hold the key to setting up calves to realize their full potential.
Perinatal period we define as really the last third of pregnancy or gestation to the first 3 weeks of the calf's life. And we're particularly interested in how many nutrients are getting to the calf and then affecting its growth and development and ultimately its long-term health, reproductive efficiency, carcass quality, etc. When I think about causes of changes in perinatal nutrient availability to the calf, essentially we're talking about things like nutrient balance of the cow. And in particular, things that affect her nutrient balance are her nutrient intake. So how good is the forage? Is she being supplemented? And then also her nutrient requirements. Is it a heifer that's still growing? Is it a cow with a high lactation potential that has a lot of demand there? Is it a cold stress cow who needs more energy to stay warm? Or maybe even a heat stress cow who's eating less because she's experiencing fescue toxicosis? Once the calf is born, certainly it's relying on the cow or the first calf heifer to make colostrum and milk. But also it has to be vigorous enough to get to that colostrum or milk. It has to consume it, and it has to have a good enough GI tract or gut that it can actually digest and absorb those nutrients and use it. And interestingly, like I said, the cow's nutrients impact the calf and help it develop either appropriately or not. But also the neonatal calf, we know that what happens to it early in its life can actually determine how it grows and develops for the rest of its life. So we know that calves that maybe don't consume as much colostrum and get sick early in their life are less likely to grade choice or less likely maybe to have a high weaning weight. And so that's kind of the second window of the calf's development, is once it's born, getting all of its organ systems together, getting its immune function going, and growing appropriately.
But the gut needs to be ready. Relying on maternal health to ensure calf vigor and performance starts before birth.
People often don't really think about the gut or the GI tract of the calf, but if you think about big reasons that the calves get sick or that die early in their life, past things like cold stress and dystocia, the next two big reasons are respiratory disease and scours. And so certainly from a standpoint of disease, the gut is trying to deal with all the pathogens that are coming in from the outside, and so it's important to make sure it's developed appropriately. On the other side, though, it wants to keep pathogens out the gut, but it needs to bring Ig immunoglobulins in from colostrum to create passive immunity, and it also needs to bring nutrients in. So a calf doesn't have that many nutrient stores, needs to consume colostrum really early, and it can only do something with those nutrients if the gut is actually ready to digest and absorb those and bring them in.
Genetics also play a role in perinatal calf health.
So one of my really big soapboxes is to make sure that we don't decrease fetal growth or decrease birth weight by nutrient restricting or taking feed away from a cow or heifer while she's pregnant. So, if we want to decrease birth weight because we're worried about dystocia or something, we really need to make sure we do that genetically, because we want the genetics of the calf to tell it how much to grow as a fetus, and we don't want them to fall short of that. If they fall short of that, they change kind of their growth trajectory. It's the equivalent of having a calf that's stunted during the pre-weaning period. And we all know that we don't like dogs or pigs. We don't like the smallest calf in the herd based on its age. And so we really want to make sure that they meet their genetic potential as a fetus, because the growth and development they're doing then is setting them up for everything they're going to do after birth.
Feed pregnant cows right if you want healthy calves that stay healthy.
When we think about how we actually keep calves alive, they're born alive, how we keep them alive is make sure that they get the nutrients they need before they're born, and then that they continue to get the nutrients they need. And there's a lot of factors that go into that, certainly, but one of the biggest ones is that cows are fed appropriately, because if we feed cows appropriately when they're pregnant, then the calf can do a lot on its own.
Up next, we hear about Bailey Harsh, an Angus success story. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Angus Report. Bailey Harsh was equipped with the work ethic and mindset required to succeed as a junior member. Now, as an assistant professor in meat science at the University of Illinois, Bailey shares her talents fostered by the Angus Foundation to cultivate the next generation of agriculturalists through hands-on learning and cutting-edge beef research.
My name is Bailey Harsh. I'm an assistant professor of meat science in the Department of Animal Sciences at the University of Florida. Growing up, I came from a family that half of them were grain farmers, the other half raised Angus bulls in southeastern Ohio, and so had a little bit of family history within the Angus breed, and it was kind of one of those Stories very similar to what it is for a lot of young people. They get their first 4-H project and then it kind of spiraled out of control, right? We had this family history in Angus, and when I got involved with my first Angus heifer, we had the opportunity to go to the National Junior Angus Show when it was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and from then on, I knew I was hooked. We didn't miss another junior show for the entirety of my junior career. I always knew I wanted to be involved in agriculture, specifically beef production in some capacity, but it wasn't until I started my undergraduate at Ohio State University that I knew I had an interest in the meats area. Being from Ohio originally, I had kind of a home base back in Ohio with the certified Angus beef based out of Worcester. I always had some ambitions to teach. It wasn't really until I got involved more on interacting with some of the team there that I realized the meat side was what was going to be, that was my career option. So I did my undergraduate at Ohio State, and I had the opportunity to join the crew out at Oklahoma State. One OSU wasn't good enough, I had to hit 2, and worked there in beef production as well, and specifically in the area of meat science. From there, I took some opportunities to pursue my PhD at the University of Illinois. Again, focusing on fresh beef and a little bit of fresh pork quality, just for some flavor, right? And most recently had the opportunity to join the crew down here at the University of Florida as an assistant professor in meat science, where I do teaching primarily and research. And so for me, the binding element to all of those universities, for as much geographical location as I've seen over the years, is that the Angus Foundation was supportive of my education through actually all 3 of my degrees. When you think about going and pursuing postgraduate education, you kind of have to think about it like a business person a little bit. And so when you think about your peers that are going straight out into the workforce and earning a living, they've got 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5, 6 years of pay that you're not being competitive there because you are pursuing this graduate education. And so you're putting off earning potential for the future. But when you think about the ability to be able to afford that postgraduate education because you're not bringing in the same level of income, Angus Foundation really was absolutely crucial in me being able to get that level of education and do that in a way that enabled me to be debt-free and to focus on some of the things that I need to now as a young professional. So when I think about reasons to give back to the Angus Foundation, there's 2 things that come to mind, right? First being their dedication to their young people that they're developing. We know that students and the youth are going to be our future. As an educator, I understand this, but the Angus Foundation absolutely has a really strong understanding of this, and they've made that dedication known through their ability or willingness to give scholarship dollars to help young people like myself.
Bailey serves as a great role model for young Angus enthusiasts. That's a wrap for this week's Angus Report. Tune in next week for another episode. And we have some exciting news. To keep up with digital trends, we'll be expanding our online educational resources. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Angus TV, to stay updated. See you next week.